Welcome, my friends. This is Hello Country. We ready to fire this thing up, Papa Country?
We are, Mike.
Hit the banjos. Welcome back for another edition of a podcast dedicated to the country life. Our friend right there, Papa Country, well, he did the Green Acres thing, and he took off from the city and made a life for himself in the country where it has really, really become a better way of life for him. How you been, buddy?
Oh, we've been fantastic. Thanks, Mike. We're just really enjoying it up here. This is our first fall, and I should send you a picture because the colors are just unbelievable all around us. I just see red and yellow and orange. We're in God's country, man. It's really beautiful up here.
It is amazing. You step outside the city, which is, by the way, in many parts, and certainly in Ontario, we're blessed with that. But there's a lot of beautiful places to see it. But the minute you get out into the country, even just a little bit, the scenery and the way that it feels is very different. And so if you need a little break, hop in the vehicle and head out to the country for just a little bit and breathe in the fall air. It makes a difference. It feels really good.
Oh, yeah. Come on up to Great County. Take a drive through the Beaver Valley. You will be amazed.
Hey, did you do some hunting this weekend?
I did indeed. Yeah, Mama Country, God love her, let me loose on Thanksgiving Sunday
with a weapon in hand,
with a shotgun. Yeah. So I did a little. My first ever. This was a bucket list hunt for me because I'm relatively new to hunting. But I did a goose and duck hunt.
Oh wow!
With the folks at Grey Bruce Outfitters. So what a wonderful experience. And I got to. So the hunt itself was amazing, but the highlight of that experience was when I got home and my boys and I cleaned up 4 geese and 2 ducks. They got in there. Yeah, they got in there, not squeamish at all. And we cooked them up, and that was the first of 2 wonderful Thanksgiving dinners.
Well, that is awesome. And had you ever cooked a goose even, let alone cleaned one? And
no, never had goose, never cooked a goose, never shot a goose.
And how did it turn out? Was it delish?
Yeah, it was really, really nice.
Oh, well, congratulations to you.
I probably came away with 20 pounds of meat. No word of a lie.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on a goose.
Well, there you go. A country feast that was taken care of right there by Papa Country. Way to go, man.
Thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving belated to you and your wonderful family. Mama Country, she tolerates a lot, and so we're thankful that she does. Listen, this is an episode that you know that I'm going to hone in on. I love history. I'm fascinated walking around in places where history is right there before us, and I want to just kind of make a quick point, if I may, Papa Country. It's nice in the city. You find a lot of heritage. You find a lot of history. Canada is very, very new by comparison to most places you'll go and see history. And yet somehow in our city centers, we've managed to mow it down with condo buildings and freeways and all kinds of needs that we have as a city society. Whereas, once again, if you step outside into the country just a few minutes, a lot of that heritage has not just been left in place, but it's been preserved. And I think that you've probably had that experience yourself.
Oh, case in point is our barn. So, I mean, we see history and experience heritage every day. And, we have an old barn here, and I'd venture to say it's probably from the early 1900s, if not built in the late 1800s. And we are trying to preserve it. I've been talking to some guys to come over and help fix a bit of a cave-in, which is saddening to me, but I think we can do it. We can keep this guy standing for years to come. When we speak about history and heritage, particularly in Grey Highlands or Grey County, first person who comes to mind is our next guest. He goes by the name of Museum Rob. He is the curator at South Grey Museum. Rob, welcome to the show.
How's it going? Thank you for having me.
In fact, his title is very fancy. It's Community Heritage Curator, which I like. I like that. He's the HCH in town over there. So let's just remember that. This is a very interesting job. Did you grow up in the community that you're working in now to preserve the heritage and keep the stories alive?
Not quite. I was born and raised in North York, Toronto. at the fair intersection of ye old Jane and Wilson. And I'm a recent emigre. My wife and I moved up to Grey County in actually Canada Day of 2017.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And then I had a serendipitous route into my current role.
How did you end up there? You were just fascinated with the history and it led you down this road?
Well, it's funny, my title should really be guy that likes old stuff and other stuff that's around and will tell you about it if given the chance.
Well, that does sound like a curator by definition, Rob.
It kind of it does.
Yeah.
So the long and the short is I spent most of my life finding old things on the curb and in dumpsters and a lot of stuff on the side of Black Creek. And my grandfather showed me that these old things had value and you could take them and fix them up and turn them into other stuff. And then I went to U of T for history. Never used that degree per se, because I became an industrial designer and started running companies in the building product space. And basically on a daily basis, what other words like, well, they don't make it like they used to. And, why is stuff so consumable, et cetera, et cetera. So I've always loved old things. I've always surrounded myself with old stuff. I like old cars, old motorcycles. Anyway, when we moved up here, we were building a house, my wife and I was frozen out of construction in October because Grey County. And then she suggested that I volunteer at this little museum in Flesherton, which I did, and then joined the board shortly after. And the role came up and I was happy to fill the spot. And from there, I've basically been letting much of my optimism and ignorance guide me.
It's interesting.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. Nice.
Papa Country.
Good resolution.
That was a good one, buddy. Well, it's a very beautiful area to be doing this in, and the heritage just elevates that in my mind. I'm looking at some of the buildings in the area, for example, that would just be fascinating to me if I moved to the neighborhood. I would just naturally want to find out more. The candy factory house, for example, Kerr's Bridge looks beautiful. There are all of these incredible buildings that have history that are still standing there looking really wonderful. So if you were interested in this, it's almost like you landed in a fairy tale situation for yourself.
Literally, it's like that. I am so humbled. When it comes to buildings, for instance, staring out of one of the narrow windows in our little cinder block museum, I'm looking at the former house of Mr. F.H.W. Hickling. This house is a grand house on the east side of Highway 10, down the hill in Flesherton. And it was owned by F.H.W. Hickling, who was a very long time general store owner in the town. In fact, I have one of his signs here in the museum, and it advertises white lead paint. And the colors are still banging, which is awesome. But this house it's neat. It's this mishmash of Victorian era architecture. So it has like these tall, it has pairs of tall windows with rounded tops that are known as Italianate. And the roof is fancier than it needs to be. Yet it's made of very humble materials. So what that demonstrates is, at that time, it was hard to travel from place to place. You didn't have immediate transmission of information. So you would demonstrate your social stature in architecture by making your house as fancy as possible. This comes from a time when ladies' dress was also very fancy. Men indicated their social status by wearing spats and like tall hats, canes, that kind of thing. So yet it's made out of bricks that were cast just outside of Markdale, and then a different color brick that was cast just outside of Croton. And those bricks were made from the earth, and they were put into place by Scottish and Irish emigres that brought their craft from the old country. So it's this very cool last of the old, first of the new thing. But for people that for people that would just pass it by, they think, oh, that's just an old house.
No, and as you pointed out, now I look at this building and it is a bit of a mishmash of eras and styles. Very cool. This is just one of the many stories. So now let's talk a little bit about how heritage factors into your community planning. It looks to me like a lot of these buildings and points of interest historically are actually being preserved very methodically. How are you guys going about keeping all of this so rich?
That's a great question. So I encourage anyone listening to this to check out Heritage Grey Highlands. You can do a quick Google search and bring them up. They're a group of citizens that is appointed by the Council of Grey Highlands, and they have a repository online. It's led by a very nice architectural enthusiast named Nancy. They have a repository online of information about these cool old buildings in the area. So they have a program of there's listing and there's also designation. And one of them, I don't quote me on which of the two levels I'm speaking about here. There's one that puts your house on a list of, hey, this is a cool heritage house. And there's another one that gives it further protections, let's say. So I think part of the preservation of these old buildings, which is actually what I'm learning, kind of the preservation of heritage itself, is making people realize that they're special. Once you demonstrate that a house is special or that an artifact is special, people tend to elevate it. Mm-hmm. And when they elevate it, they keep it around. They look at it a little more closely. And if you keep it around long enough, the world around it changes. And then the relative difference between that thing you kept and how the world looks now will tell you something. Like that house, the candy factory house you're mentioning in Markdale. That was a candy factory for a short time in the 40s and 50s, used by the F.T. Hill store, which was a huge, prosperous general store on the northwest corner of the Main Street in Markdale. Mm-hmm. Main Street Markdale and the town itself is seeing a whole revitalization right now. And the role that heritage plays, particularly when it comes to built structure, is it says, these are substantive things that were here, that have endured, and they remain. They're resilient. So perhaps this place is worthy of preservation, it's worthy of veneration, and you can place yourself.
That makes perfect sense. And in fact, even looking at the F.T. Hill Candy Factory, the building is pretty much as it looked while it was being used. Even the brickwork is noted in the description of the building because it has, there's a methodology to it that you put into it as a mason that was probably just being introduced in Ontario at the time, as you point out, English and Irish and different, I would imagine different kind of building materials in a newer place like Ontario led to them building something that looked very old school British in a place that had all these new materials. And it's just stunning. If it's the way that it looks in the picture right now, it has been beautifully preserved.
It's gorgeous. And there's some really dandy colors on the interior that are seem to my eye anyway to be period correct. A lot of like these really cool pastels and
which would have actually really emulated the candy of the time, which a lot of them were pastels and that sort of thing. So it would have actually kind of probably suited their business look as well.
Possibly. What I find so cool about it is that bricks are these are very humble building materials. They were made out of earth, and then they were placed in molds. I have several of these molds at the museum, as well as samples of the bricks from the area. Different brickyards in this area yielded different colored bricks. And it's cool because,
wow.
Yeah. The other thing that's neat is that the grout or the mortar in between these bricks was made using lime that was fired in kilns. And that lime comes from the limestone that is underneath this area. So these are kind of mud huts. I do walking tours with kids around. Yeah. I do walking tours with kids. Basically, let me contextualize this. Sometimes when 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 something has been there for a long time, and you've been there for a long time, that thing becomes invisible because it's always been there. And then after years pass, it loses its specialness until it gets pointed out again as special. So I take kids from, there's a local group in town here in Flesherton called the Hanley Institute. And I've taken some of their kids on walking tours of the town of Flesherton. And one of the things I love pointing out to these little inquisitive minds is the graffiti on some of these buildings in town. And I'll ask them to reach their arms up and touch the wall. And sure enough, that is where the graffiti ends. Because kids have always scratched graffiti. So you see all this graffiti about 4.5 feet
wow.
and below. Yeah, you don't see the grown-ups scratching their names into things.
That's something they can relate to now.
That's right. So that you see these kids and they'll put their hands on these letters that were scratched by other ruffians and ragamuffins from back in the day.
That's
and
amazing.
Their penmanship was better. They actually incorporate serif into their letters, which you don't see in graffiti now.
Maybe it was easier to carve serif than it would be to spray paint it. But the other thing is,
likely,
I would imagine that kids are blown away when, for example, one of the buildings I looked at was the Munchkin Hotel, which, by the way, was the first church in town until the church was built. So they would use the actual tap room or the beer room for church services on Sunday. You know, so
the Munchkin House is very cool. It's a very prominent building on the southeast corner of the main intersection of Flesherton, and it's cool. It's named after Aaron Munchkin, who was one of the first settlers in the area. He had, for all intents and purposes, the east side of current Highway 10, whereas Mr. W.K. Flesher had the west side, and that's why it's called Flesherton.
Okay.
Yeah, the Munchkin House
were
had
the
a fire.
and the Fleshers, were they feuding? We could make something up here if you don't have anything.
I don't know if they were quite the Hatfields and McCoys, but this was a temperate town for a very long time, and the Munchkin House was the less than temperate place, let's say. And if you wanted to be a teetotaler, and by the way, do you know that teetotaler stands for the capital T in total?
No, I did not. I thought it was like you total tea. I had 25 teas in total today.
No, sir. It is. I stand for total abstinence, and that's total with a T. I am a teetotaler.
Wow.
Yes. Anywho's, if you wanted to be a teetotaler, you would stay.
Don't blow by that. That was brilliant history. Well done, Rob. Sorry, go ahead.
So if you wanted to be a teetotaler, you would stay at the Park House. And the Park House is another inn that's built on the west side of Flesherton. Now, the cool thing is you'll notice there's a lot of inns and taverns and boarding houses in these areas, and that's because there was no motorized transportation. It took a long time to get from place to place, so if you got there, you had to stay overnight.
Right.
That's also why people that had, say, a thriving general or department store would accrue wealth. The wealthiest people in the town were typically the doctor, because humans need fixing, the pharmacist, because you need iodine, otherwise everybody has goiters, which was a thing, and also the people that could aggregate and then distribute the goods. And these people built all the big houses.
Wow,
it's fascinating.
I'm just reading here. This is also fascinating about the Munchkin Hotel, for example. If you were new to Canada or you were just establishing in the area, you might stay there while you made arrangements for property, for work, or for a place to live in the area. So these are just a few of the stories. And now here's the other thing, Rob. In talking to you in just a couple of minutes, you coolify history on a local level for kids, which I think is a big deal. If you want something to remain cool and remain legendary, it has to be built that way in the minds of youth. And so what's it like reaching out? And is that a big focus for you, youth in the community?
Yes, it is. I'll qualify that. So I'm 34 right now, which means that I'm an in-betweener. And I'm also not from this place. So I've got a good amount of ignorance. What that means is I am curious, and I'm not necessarily placed in a given demographic, let's say. So a lot of what I do is talking to old people who are amazing.
Yeah.
And then I take that stuff and I translate that through the generations so that it gets to the young. So I think
you're well positioned to be that mediator of info.
Right now I am.
Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, I've been doing this thing called the Recall Project, where I call local seniors and I talk to them about their lives, and then I tell other people about what it is I've learned.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. If you check out our Instagram at South Grey Museum, you'll notice a bunch of these posters that approximate the keep calm and carry on, only it's the voices of these people that I talk to. And my whole thinking is, what's the point of having a publicly funded local institution like a museum if it's just to house our old stuff? Why? What's the point of housing old things? I think that these are little bits of material truth that basically demonstrate things that humanity, in this area at least, did previously. And then we can learn from that. But if we don't learn from that stuff, what's the point of having the stuff? Kids don't even know how to use a rotary phone anymore because it's not relevant.
Right. It's so true. One of my friend's kids doesn't understand what a remote control is. You believe that, Papa Country? What's this for? You just say it. Dad, just say it into the TV and it'll change the channel for you. This is fascinating. Rob, where can people find out more about the museum and the programs that you have available?
So you can check us out at www.southgreymuseum.ca, or you can follow us on Instagram at South Grey Museum, or you can check us out on Facebook at South Grey Museum. If you're around Grey Highlands, you'll probably hear somebody droning on and on and on about bricks and coins and old stuff, and that'll probably be me. So,
well, listen, Rob, would you be able to find some time as we unravel some of the history and heritage in country places? An interpreter like yourself would be amazing to have on hand. And please let us know upcoming events and things that you're doing online while we're all kind of making our way through this wild experience called life right now, where we can stay in touch with you and a little bit with our past.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. It's been awesome.
Papa Country, you did it again. A great guest with a link to the past that makes a country so appealing in our present. And I'll encourage you to go back in time, listen to the other guests that we have on, everything from motocross and trail riding to tractors, real estate, and much, much more in the way of guests right here on Hello Country. And where can people find out more about Hello Country, Papa Country?
Well, they can check us out online at hellocountry.ca or on Instagram at Hello Country Magazine.
All right, we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody. See you, Papa Country.
Thanks. Bye-bye.